It's 8:15. We'll call the meeting of the Education Finance Committee to order. I don't think we quite have a quorum, so we won't go to the minutes. But we do have Representative Newton, House File 2209, School Readiness Program Funding Increased. Yeah. Representative Newton, would you like to move your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'd like to move House File 2209.
Very good. Please proceed.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, House File 2209 provides school readiness aid, an increase in school readiness aid from a little over $10 million a year to approximately $30 million a year. A district or a group of school districts may establish a school readiness program to prepare children to enter school with the necessary skills and behavior to succeed. In my school district, District 11, we've had really good success with our school readiness program, and we think that it has a lot to do with our equally great success in closing the achievement gap. This bill increases the annual state aid for school readiness from $10.1 million to $30 million a year and places the amount in statute. Under current law, the aid is backed into the actual, it's based on the actual amount appropriated for the program. And with that, Mr. Chair, I would like to introduce my two testifiers, Steve Kerr, who is the Community Ed Director for District 11, Anoka-Hennepin, and Superintendent Dave Webb, who is the Superintendent for South St. Paul.
Very good. And who would like to go first?
Chair Marquardt, I believe I'm going first.
Very good. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Steve Kerr. I'm the Community Education Director and Government Relations Director for the Anoka-Hennepin School District. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning. The School Readiness Program, in the wisdom of the legislature, was established, I believe, in 1990. However, the funding hasn't increased since 1991. There's nothing in education that we can buy with $1991 anymore. And clearly, we all know, you've certainly, I know as this committee, have heard plenty of research regarding the value of early learning and what it does for our children and the achievement gap, so I won't repeat that kind of information. And some of the most recent information is indicating that the achievement gap is appearing now. They can measure it at 2 years old. So clearly we need to do some investment here, and clearly if we want to reach the world's best workforce, and clearly if we want to be a competitive school program statewide, nationwide, in the world, that we're going to need to make those kinds of investments. I think, so my words just aren't empty. I'm going to refer you, each of you should have this. I'm going to do this. Outcomes are always a quick way to do this. You should have a graph on the inside facing page. Those are the results that we've had with our children. We did pre- and post-testing with our children. You can see by the dark blue graph where those children came in the fall assessment. You can see with the light blue graph where those children were leaving us in the spring. I think the other piece that I would share with you in terms of this is real data, and then I'll also give you, just to provide some additional reinforcement for the power of the data that you're looking at, is that our school district found that they needed to change their cut scores this year. The entry cut scores. We screen all of our incoming kindergarten kids to see where they're coming at so that the teachers are ready to teach those children the first day of school. And they found that we are now getting to such a large number of kids and making such an impact on their learning and their entry point that we're having to do some different things in our education system. So one of the measures for me in my role as to making sure that children are ready for school as a community education director is to see that now it's interesting that K-12 is having to re-engineer first grade and second grade because of the number of kids we're pushing through that are coming in at a higher level. We're having to re-engineer the instruction because we're having to set higher trajectories for these children when they're coming in order to sustain their trajectory through the system. So just my words aren't just empty. I brought you to the bottom line first. I often am asked by our local legislative delegation, how do we achieve these results? And I know sometimes it's popular to find the silver bullet. There are no silver bullets here. There are a box of silver bullets, if you will, because it takes a lot of things. First of all, we're doing a lot of things with parents, to engage parents, home visiting, lots of conferencing, lots of homework things they can take home with their children. We have to provide transportation. We tried it without transportation, but when you're working with high poverty at-risk populations, in order to get the persistence in the classroom, you have to get them there. That's the basic piece. We found a huge difference in performance results when we were able to make sure that those children were able to attend the classes on a regular basis. Highly trained staff. We use licensed staff to teach these kids. We've worked really hard in Anoka Hennepin to align our pre-K programs, and it's paid significant dividends, huge dividends. I'll tell a little story, and it isn't a one-way street. Early learning educators know a lot about education that K-12 don't. And I would say that there are positive things going on in both directions in our school district. A little story out of school, if you will. As we started looking to align some of our curriculum in Anoka Hennepin, we found that our exit standard for our pre-K program was higher than the exit standard for kindergarten in math. Well, did that cause some interesting conversations to occur and cause us to re-engineering, as I talked about re-engineering our instruction? So I think when you look at what are all of the things that make a difference, that make the results happen, that you see on the bottom line, that's all of the things. We've trained all of our staff. In fact, all our early learning supervisors went through the Minnesota Principals Academy along with our elementary principals and created some tremendous dialogue about how we can engage. Co-location of the programs, putting these programs in the elementary schools so that the families and the teaching staff can develop relationships with the families and vice versa. So that's a whole range of pieces that makes those kinds of things successful. And I could probably talk to you for hours. I have a passion for it, and early learning is a big, important thing in terms of what we do in our school district. But I would share with you, please consider this. It's been 1991. We're serving high-risk kids. It's making a difference. It's successful. I've got a track record. You want to see what we're doing? Come out and join us, and there's many other districts around that are doing many of the same things. I'll hand it off to my colleague.
Mr. Kurt, thank you so much. That's great to hear. So, Superintendent Webb.
Well, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity today, and I'm going to give you more of our...
Would you please state your name, please?
Sure, it's Dave Webb, Superintendent of Schools for South St. Paul.
Very good, thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to give you our South St. Paul story just to share the picture of what's happening this year and next year in South St. Paul and the impact of the great decisions that you're making at the legislative level. So currently we offer 2-, 3-, and 4-day-a-week programming in South St. Paul for our earliest learners, for 3- and 4-year-olds. And next school year, thanks to your move toward all-day K from the last session, we're trying to reallocate some of those dollars toward early learning. So in essence, we're tapping general fund dollars to support more of our neediest students earlier. What we currently see is that about 65-66% of our students access our early learning programs in South St. Paul. It's in a pretty small, tight-knit community. That's an incredibly high number. What we aren't reaching, and the kids that we aren't reaching, are the students that we most typically see later on in the earlier grades that stumble into the achievement gap. It's our high poverty students, our students of color oftentimes, our ELL students that come into our kindergarten classrooms, and our kindergarten teachers share that we feel like we're teaching two classes, one of students that are prepared and one of the students that are struggling. And the families that aren't coming into our preschool programs are the ones that we are hoping to now target coming into this fall. The struggle is that there are still not enough dollars there to close the gap on just reaching all students and families that want to participate. So I'm here to share with you that I think that we are the only organization that can help close that gap and to help kids get on the right track from the very first experience in school systems. And I had a chance after an AMSD session just a week or so ago to speak with Representative Marquardt, and if the goal is the world's best workforce, if the goal is by the time they graduate from high school to make sure that everyone is ready to hit the workforce and hit the ground running to get the best GDP and a 2% increase that we could have predicted through the Federal Reserve, we have to start earlier. And so next fall, we will be providing a free bus to get kids, any student that would like to come to our preschool programs. We're increasing by about $200,000 our scholarship money available for our neediest families. But again, we were already doing all-day K. Many districts weren't. We're trying to reallocate some of those funds earlier. We are now providing them the free breakfast for those families to get into our free 5-day-a-week, first time ever, 5-day-a-week, half-day programming. The students can then get a free lunch. Some of our families, if we still have remaining funds, could get free afternoon childcare and take a free bus home. We're trying to eliminate all those barriers. I spoke with Connie Bernardi just before we started here. If you just cost out the cost of one half-day classroom, it's about $2,500 for the year per child. So the money would fund essentially one classroom worth of kids. And if you look at the high poverty level that we have in South St. Paul and in many metro districts, in the youngest families, we often have a 50% poverty rate. So we're here today to ask for that increase in funding, and I'll just leave you with one last thing. If you can get students coming into the traditional system rather than a daycare center, we can eliminate transportation barriers, the special education support need barriers for many of our struggling kids that are early identified, the lunch and breakfast program needs, and their early learning needs that get them fully prepared for kindergarten. So thank you.
Superintendent Webb, thank you, and I appreciated our conversation the other day, and I appreciate the message you have of how this impacts the economy into the future, what we do here. So
thanks for all the good things you're doing.
So,
Appreciate it.
thank you. Members, we have a run here, a handout, if you want to take that out, that's been provided by staff here. And so before I entertain questions, Mr. Strom, would you care to just review that?
Mr. Chair, members, the title of this printout is Estimated School Readiness Aid for Fiscal Year 15. The first part of the printout shows the current baseline amount of school readiness, and the last three columns will show the increase. Let me briefly explain how this formula works. The legislature sets a dollar amount in statute that's to be funded, and that amount is evenly divided into two categories of revenue. The first is based simply on the number of 4-year-olds served by the district. So that's the third from the left column that says fiscal year 15 current law 4-year-old aid. So each district's share of the roughly $5 million that's in this part of the program is simply based on the number of 4-year-olds in the district, and that population is shown in the first column. The second part of school readiness revenue is based on the free and reduced lunch count of the school district. And there's no concentration here, but each district's share is compared to the state total, and that determines the distribution of the second $5 million, which is in the column labeled current law, free, and reduced aid. And so, Mr. Chair, that's how the two parts of the formula currently work. You can see our estimate for fiscal year 15 under current law is $10.06 million. By raising the amount of aid from the current $10 million amount to $30 million, the new money would be evenly distributed between those two columns, those two categories, and the last three columns show the aid for the 4-year-olds, the additional aid that would go out on the free and reduced lunch count, and the total then of $19.8 million of additional aid that would flow. The effective date in this bill is for this to start first in fiscal year 15, and this program is entirely a state aid program.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. I've got 5 people who have questions. Try to keep these short and to the point, and then we'll go to anyone else who wants to testify on this bill, and then we'll lay this over. So, Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this shows that the policies that we've established in a bipartisan way are working. So, Mr. Kerr, what do your parents pay, or what have they been paying on the sliding scale fee to equal this 34% of this very excellent brochure? And thank you for your very informative presentation.
Mr. Kerr.
Chair Marquardt, Representative Erickson. I'll try to make it simple. We serve overall in the school district about 1,200 to 1,300 different children. Some of those families that can pay in our school readiness program, they have the ability to pay. And then we have, for our really intensive services, where we're really trying to target the children with ELL, high poverty, they pay nothing. So that goes from paying fair amount full to all the way to nothing. And much as Superintendent Webb has described, there's kind of a mix of strategies here that we're blending, and so some of it depends on what's the intensity of services. But a family that can pay for services does pay for services. Those families who have high risk and high need for us academically, they're not paying for that high intensity service because we need to get them into the program to close that achievement gap. So the range of fees can be quite broad. From our families.
So, Mr. Chair.
Representative Erickson.
So, Mr. Kerr, how will that change if we change this baseline? Because what you've demonstrated here is you have great teachers. There's no question. To have this kind of improvement in a year, because you're showing the 12-13 year. I mean, this is more than impressive. This is stellar.
Yep.
You have great teachers. You said you do home visits. You have parents involved. I mean, you're doing all the right things. So, I think what you've done is just tremendous, and I'm sure we're going to try to help you some more. But
I can probably,
Mr. Kerr.
I'll give you a couple quick spots.
No.
Excuse me.
Go ahead. You're fine. Just go ahead.
Representative Erickson, a couple of things. I'll give you a couple of examples. We had a classroom last fall. Okay, what we do in our classrooms is our special education program, which is sometimes a hidden part of this across the state. Our special education programs across the state generally are using our school readiness programs as their primary community-based placement option. So we always hold some spots in each of our classrooms for special education students. But in addition to that, one of the purposes of these kinds of programs is to kind of be a safety net. In other words, a lot of families don't recognize learning disabilities or things that are in their children because they don't have a comparison for the young family. So the example I'm going to try to draw for you is one of the classrooms we had the 2 special ed slots were filled, but in addition we had seven preschoolers that showed up in that classroom with learning issues and developmental issues. So now you've got 9 children out of 15 children in a classroom with some significant issues. Some of what we had hoped we were going to be able to accomplish with the scholarship program, and that hasn't played out very well, but is to kind of infuse some additional resources into that kind of a classroom when all of a sudden families and children show up who don't know they have some issues, and we can kind of shoot in, if you will, some extra support in terms of adult support to help the instructional process and move those children along more effectively in what we're doing. So that's one example. In addition, we have other children that we are not serving yet, and there are some things that I would like to do. If I look at our program, I feel like we still need to do some additional coaching with my staff in terms of effective strategies around ELL and how we can help those new learners of our language move along more quickly. And I think probably the other, I'll use this analogy. In my district, I feel a little bit like the pastor. I walk around the district like this with my little hat and try to get all the funding I can to do this. And I would tell you, this spot that you see here is a result of me doing that for a lot of years and building pilots and saying to our school board, here are the results that we can have on the system. If you give me the tools, I can make a difference in what's going on because we've got good staff, we've got a good model, it's worked for us. I can bring it up to scale. And the board, with some of the literacy aid dollars that the legislature provided a few years ago, gave me some of those dollars to make some strategic investments in our organization. However, as you all know, pressures for school district budgets are unrelenting. And I have a commitment from our board for 4 years. I'm finishing up year 2. So I'm a little concerned if these results go away in Anoka-Hennepin, And we're seeing some of what's happening. It's moving up through the grades. We're closing the achievement gap. We're doing what you're asking us to do. I'm worried about whether I'll be able to continue to do that. And I'm sorry, Chair Marquardt, I have a passion around this.
There are no apologies for passion
I know
in this
it's fairly
committee,
obvious,
Mr. Kerr.
I care about
Very-
this, and I think it can make a difference for our school systems.
Very
And that's- I believe it, and I think I can show those results.
Chair Marquardt, if I may, I
Representative
served for
Newton.
12 years on the advisory board for community ed and listened to this, the same thing, and then when I was on the school board, was hit up for money constantly, so it pays off.
Very good. Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just two quick questions. One for, I think, for Superintendent Webb, probably. You mentioned the scholarship program. You know, we put $48 million into the scholarship program, and what you're asking for is going from $10 million to $30 million in aid here, while $60 million in the biennium. What is it about the scholarship program that's not working out for you?
Superintendent Webb.
So we actually applied for the Pathway to Scholarship funds. So we received $50,000 from the Pathway to Scholarship funds. So again, if you do the quick math on one morning half-day preschool program would be $50,000. So that would be 20 students, or some people like 18 in a preschool class, but we're using the number 20 at 2,500.
Yeah.
And long story short is we have about a 30% gap in kids that we need to serve. Again, we have about 2/3 coming in our doors, and we think that we're here today to just say we need to increase the school readiness funding.
And if I might add to that,
Okay,
I think
Mr. Kerr.
Our experience, I'm not doing very well, sorry. I would add to this is that from our experience in Anoka Hennepin, we qualified for $135,000. I would tell you that at the first check that crossed the doorstep was the third week in February for 10% of the funds. It's difficult in a school district to staff, and I talked about that classroom that we wanted to shoot some adults into. It's tough to do that when there isn't a cash flow until that point in time. The paperwork has been atrocious. To give you a pathway, we're asking low income, sometimes English language families, to fill out 9 pages of paperwork, send it back to a vendor. If a phone number, a middle initial is missing, it gets sent back to us as a school district to go back to the family another time to get the information. We get it completed, and it's been this back and forth piece, and now I have some cash flow, and I'm well through the school year. So that's kind of a quick synopsis of what we've experienced.
Well, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that, because that will, we're riding fast and furious on our next questions for the Minnesota Department of Education next time they show up to talk to us, so I appreciate that. And then finally, we often talk around here about we constantly need more. So we're going from 10 to 30 million or 60 million for the biennium. What is full funding?
Mr. Kerr? Or
Mr. Marquardt, I'll try to do this better. Chair Marquardt, Representative. I think, in my opinion, I think the target, if the world was mine and I would mess with things the way I would probably go half-day kindergarten and an intensive targeted 4-year-old program. We've crossed the river to full-day kindergarten, which is fine. But I'd say we'd look at a targeted 4-year-old program. I target the at-risk children in the state. Clearly, there's a relationship in terms of the achievement gap and poverty. So if you want a thumbnail kind of measure, free and reduced is probably a reasonable thumbnail number, in which is probably a third of our student population in that age group. That's probably our target. If we targeted at-risk populations in that manner, in the fashion that we are trying to do in Anoka Hennepin, you can make a fairly big dent in what's happening with children coming into our school district. I know we're getting to that point where we reach some tipping point, and it's now having that impact that I talked about in our school system.
Well, Mr. Chair, I know I said 2 questions, but this is the follow-up to the second one. So what's the number? And I guess maybe this is for Representative Newton. How did you come up with 30 million? And are we going to come back next year and say, boy, if we just had 60 million or had 120 million? There's a $1.2 billion surplus. So what's the number?
Representative Newton, if we were to fully fund this, so everyone had the money they needed on this, what would that be?
Mr. Chair and Representative Woodard, I don't have a figure for you. And the thing is, it depends on how much outreach we're going to do and whether we focus our funds on getting the kids into our schools or whether we continue with, daycare programs and that sort of thing where we're funding early childhood through that. So, the total amount is an amount that I'm not familiar with. The thing is, we need additional funds in order to do the outreach, to have our ECFE personnel go out to the families, identify kids, and get those kids who really need early childhood into the schools. And perhaps Mr. Kerr has a better.
Well, I think
estimate.
we're going to move on
Yeah.
here. I don't know if we're going to come up with a number, but that's very important, Representative Woodard, what you've mentioned. I think it would be maybe knowing what populations we're going after, according to poverty or whatever that might be, to get a number, and then you can just times it by whatever.
And Mr. Chair,
Representative Woodard.
I understand that and appreciate that. I guess
Yeah.
the point is that we came up with the number 30 million.
Yeah.
How do we come up with these numbers? And that's something I think we need to explore a little bit farther, but I'll pass. Thank you.
I appreciate
Mr. Chair.
that. We're almost a half hour on this first bill, and we've got 3 more people to ask questions. I really ask that you get right to the point. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and this would primarily be Superintendent Webb. The discussion of poverty and minority student, frankly, there's some correlation with single parent and the other categories, but having been having young kids and been a young parent, there's a problem with bandwidth and that. And I would think that you should really look at single-parent households for needing some additional, assistance or putting them into this support structure, because there are only so many hours in the day, and you have to run a household. And so I think we need to, look at the kids that way too.
Representative Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the testifiers, I will agree with Representative Erickson that the results of what you're doing is just really impressive. And it really does take a really good investment in creating outcomes like that. You talked about transportation and home visiting, building closer relationship with the parents, which is really, really important, which to me also says that you are in the path of creating a welcoming environment that parents feel that they can come into to have those closer relationships. But I was also looking at your brochure as you talk about the seamless curriculum transition. And I think in the past, as we have invested in pre-K, and there's been conversations about, why should we do that when we can see by 3rd grade they have fell off, and those gains that happen in the early years are lost. And so we need that continuum of pre-K into kindergarten, into 3rd grade. It needs to be consistent, and it needs to be there. That support and those tools needs to be in place. And so one of the other things that I was thinking about as I was hearing you testify is that you want to go and look at doing more outreach and partnership. And there's a lot of us who believe that when you're targeting and focusing on communities of color and high-risk population, that they need those wraparound services. That is one of the key components that creates success. Because there are many, many barriers that are in place that goes beyond the school. And so having those partnerships, I would think, with community entities, as you think about your outreach and how to engage and really create access and better outcomes, that you can maybe do that in collaboration and with community organizations that has relationships with those families back in the community. And so I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Very quickly, here,
just-
Superintendent Webb.
I think you're right on the money. We have created partnerships just in our community with our local food shelf, the Neighbors Organization. We have partnered with and have done outreach and training to about 50 of our daycare centers and daycare homes in South St. Paul this year. We need to completely, we have rethought how we're approaching our early learning services. And when I showed up in South St. Paul, the mantra was the superintendents didn't pay much attention to early learning. And now I think they're feeling like the superintendent's paying a little bit too much attention to early learning. So I think you're right on the money.
Representative Dabney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Briefly, gentlemen, thank you for discussing the challenges you're experiencing with the scholarship system and then the difficulty of coordinating, as Representative Moran touched on. You get these kids coming in at a higher pace, and now you've got to adjust K-3 to hold those achievements. It does sound like we established a very good system for wealthy middle-class economists, maybe not so much for little kids. Question for staff. Looking at the spreadsheet, Mr. Strom, if I may, Mr. Chair, when you talk about the formula including the free and reduced aid lunch as a factor, do we differentiate between free and reduced price lunch students in that factor, and if so, how?
Mr. Strom.
Mr. Chair, Representative Dabney, no. It's the combination of the two as a total count.
Thank you. Then,
Representative Dabney.
Mr. Chair, I think that's a challenge because kids who qualify for free lunch in deep poverty, I think, often come with greater challenges related to mobility and unstable homes, related to issues of hunger and a whole host of things that are more significant than those who qualify for reduced price. And I think our lumping them in together, oops.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Chair.
Strom?
Really?
It's half of the reduced. The count is the full free and the half of the reduced. I'm so very sorry.
All right. Thank you very much. My work here is done.
We can solve a problem just like that. Just check the statutes. Is there anyone in the audience who would care to speak for or against House File 2209? Very good. Representative Hertasch, you came in after I said there were 5 people, so you've got to be very quick here.
Well, thanks to Representative Dabney, I have time.
Very good.
He left. My question has to do with identifying the hard work and effort that's been done already with regard to early childhood development. You know, early childhood development in Minnesota, pre-K, is a $3 billion private industry serving the needs already of many of those students. And we just put a lot of extra money into early childhood scholarships. And if I might use the analogy of a garden hose, when you put water into it, it doesn't come out right away. We just made these efforts last year. There's a limited pool of number of 4-year-olds or 3-year-olds or whatever. So are you not really directly competing with trying to do the same job that we're recognizing is working, such as programs as Mini Minds and other good programs that are out there?
Mr. Kerr?
Representative Marquardt, somewhere in here there's a trick question, and I don't mean that in any disrespect. It's not a simple answer. I think there is a reason. Let me say it this way. I believe there is a reason there are some of the different types of programs you see in the state of Minnesota, such as Head Start, what schools are doing, what child care is doing. It's because that reflects the family's need. And actually, I've heard this body talk about market-driven forces. I'd actually say the reason that some of those different services are there are because of what the market is asking for. I do think there are components of, if you look at the broad spectrum of services in Minnesota and say what are the purposes of it, I would say, well, education does a really good job with education. And I'll hold my results up to say so. And we have highly trained staff who are licensed in early education that deliver these results. Quality child care provides quality child care, and if they're a high-end quality child care, they will also start to have these results. So, and Head Start plays a role for our high poverty families. So I think it's the caution I would share with the body is to say not one size fits all families in Minnesota, because we have a diverse state with diverse families with various needs. And when we work in our community with our organizations, we're looking to say, what's that safety net of services, much as Representative Moran referred to, what's that safety net of services that are there to support our families across the state of Minnesota? Because they come in and out of those systems at different times. They use this at different times in that child rearing process and moving them into the school system. So I don't know that it's one or the other, but rather do we have the right support, the mix of tools out there in our state to support our families' issues? And truthfully, with the challenge we've faced economically, for a long time we underfunded school-age child care, and we've underfunded these types of programs because we didn't have the money. I'm just suggesting that we need to take a look at it because I think it's a serious priority for us to move forward as a state to look at some of these issues again.
Thank you. Mr. Kerr and Superintendent Webb, thank you so much for your testimony and for your great results. So, thank you. Representative Newton, any final comments?
No, Mr. Chair Marquardt, I'd like to renew my motion to move House File 2209.
All right, House File 2209 will be laid over for possible inclusion into the Education Finance Bill. Representative Reinert.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of the minutes of March 12th.
All right, Representative Reinert moves the approval of the March 12, 2014 minutes. Any debate? If not, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carried. Representative Halverson. And we need to move quickly, members and testifiers and authors. And so I'll move House File 2264. Representative Halverson, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. And before we move to discussion of the bill, perhaps we should entertain the A2 amendment as well. So it's an
Very
office
good.
amendment.
Who would like? Representative Morgan moves the A2 amendment. Representative Halverson, what does this do?
Mr. Chair, this just lowers the proposed increase in the ECFE formula. It matches what the Senate is doing.
Very good. All right, any discussion on that? If not, I'm going to call for the vote on the A2 amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I know that this committee is very familiar with ECFE, and as the parent of a young child, I am very familiar with it also. And when we discuss the goals of getting kids ready for education, ECFE really meets many of the goals that I hear members talking about, and that is engaging families in preparing our kids for their developmental and educational goals. It's a statewide program, as you all know, for Minnesota families with children, between the ages of birth and kindergarten, and it's offered through our school districts throughout the state. Offering it through our school districts allows schools to tailor the programs to what the communities need when they're offered at the local level, and it's funded by state aid and local levies, administered through our school districts. There are sliding fee scales that are offered for low-income families and waived fees for low-income families. However, ECFE is available to and accessed by families of all income levels. ECFE in Minnesota in 2010, which is the most current year, served over 128,000 families in Minnesota, parents and guardians, and over 122,000 children in the age group. So the reach is broad, and the outcomes are exciting to talk about. The core components, of course, are parent education provided by licensed parent educators. Parents and children are participating together in meeting their developmental and learning goals, and the participation is voluntary. This particular bill proposes to increase the current ECFE formula and tie it to the K-12 per pupil formula, so that as changes to the K-12 per pupil formula moves forward, ECFE moves right along with it. So we're not here separately every single year, every single time the formula changes to ask for a formula. I think that the previous conversation actually set this up very well, that we're not talking about very separate programs. We're talking about creating an education system from birth through graduation that is knitted together in very logical, sensible ways, and this formula change will allow us to do that. And with that, I would love to turn it over to the experts in the system, Joyce Beard and Betty Euling.
Representative Halverson, thank you so much. Who would like to go first?
I can go first.
Please state your name.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Joyce Beard, and I am the Early Learning Coordinator for the West St. Paul, Mendota Heights, Eagan area schools. My colleague and I are here today to testify in support of House File 2264, increasing the early childhood family education formula. The purpose of the ECFE program, as defined in state statute, is to provide parenting education to support children's learning and development. The core components of ECFE include parent education, early childhood education, and parent-child interaction time. In addition, home visiting that focuses on parent education and support is also a parent option of the ECFE program. ECFE first began as a pilot program 40 years ago this year. Nearly all school districts have offered ECFE since the 1990s. Teachers must be licensed in early childhood or parent and family education. ECFE is a unique education program in the United States in that it is open to all families, not just those considered at risk. Parents self-select programming that best meets their need through a variety of classes offered and differentiated by school district. Parents access the programming through a sliding fee scale that is supplemented by state funding. The genius in the origination of the ECFE program was the recognition that universal access was key in the design, grounded in an understanding that the complexities of parenting are not necessarily related to income. Bringing parents together in communities throughout the state to provide support and information for raising healthy children without stigma attached is what makes ECFE a successful model with yet to be realized potential. The state ECFE formula has not changed in over a decade, remaining at $120 per child. The stagnant funding in ECFE has created difficulties for programs not only to sustain programming, but to evolve to fully meet the current need of the shift in demographics that many school districts are experiencing. In the West St. Paul, Mendota Heights, Eagan area schools, the district's population of students in poverty, as defined by free and reduced lunch status, has nearly doubled, with 23% of students in 2003 considered to be in poverty, compared with 43% in 2012. In addition, families where English is not their primary language are also increasingly enrolling in programs. Family literacy programs that are collaborative programs between ECFE and adult basic education, as well as interpreters and translators, have become essential to ECFE programs in many districts, but also come at a cost. Understanding that transportation is also often a barrier for families of low income in program participation, many ECFE programs are in a position to find ways to provide transportation to maintain program access. While programs are creating new pathways for access to meet the evolving need in Minnesota, funding to support these changes remains stuck in the past. In the West St. Paul, Mendota Heights, Eagan area schools, ECFE programs this year, 45% of participants reported their income level was at $30,000 per year and under. I would like to conclude my testimony with a few parent quotes from recent program evaluations, as parents tend to say it best. I love ECFE. We lived in Denver, Colorado previously and found nothing even like this there. People recognize what this is worth and value the available help, advice, getting to know other parents and kids in similar situations. This has been a fantastic experience for my kids, and I have learned so much, and so have my children, and at a single mom affordable rate. It is one of the best things that Minnesota does for kids, moms, and families. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee, for an opportunity to speak to you today on behalf of the Early Childhood Family Education Program, a program we know is really making a difference for Minnesota children and their families.
Ms. Beard, thank you so much for sharing those comments. Ms. Euling?
Thank you for letting me come here today. My name is Betty Euling, and I'm the Director of Early Childhood and Family Education Programs for the New Ulm School District. That our 0 to 4 census is about 1,030 children. When I began with our ECFE program 21 years ago, we were able to offer 28 weeks of programming a year, plus summer programming, classes, and family events. Currently, because the revenue hasn't kept pace, we're down to 18 weeks of programming a year and offering no summer opportunities for families. I do a lot of grant writing in our program to help fill some of those gaps, but a lot of the grants that are out there are for new initiatives and not for continuation of a program. Currently, we offer about 10 classes a week with around 90 to 100 families who attend. Typically, many of our classes have waiting lists. That this session we had our 1-year-old class filled in 6 hours, and our 2-year-old class filled in 8 hours. Last year, that we do evaluations after each of our sessions. Last year, 99% of our parents felt that they learned new skills, or felt that their child learned new skills during the ECFE class. 100% of the parents felt that they learned information to help them do a better job of parenting. 92% felt that they had learned a new parenting technique that they would try in the future. And 99% of the parents felt that they learned where to go for help in our community. I always say that parents vote with their feet, that they wouldn't be coming to our voluntary program if they didn't feel that they were getting something out of it for themselves or their child. In our community, 64% of the eligible 0 to 4-year-olds do participate in our program. It's exciting to see a young, low-income single mom inviting others in her apartment building to come to ECFE because it's been such a positive experience to her. It's fulfilling to know that when an ECFE teacher saw an 8-month-old with some social emotional concerns, she worked with the mom to refer the child to Help Me Grow, where the child was tested and identified as being on the autism spectrum. The ability to begin intervention services so early has made all the difference in his life. It's heartwarming to read the note from the woman who talks about how ECFE just played such an important role in raising her family, and now the joy she sees in that her grandchild has now started his first ECFE class. I take pride that our ECFE office is a one-stop information and referral service for families with young children in our community. ECFE programs have grown to be a trusted and valuable resource in Minnesota communities, but without an increase in funding, each year we have to pare down our program to stay within a stagnant budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have runs here. If you want to take those out, members, very quickly. Mr. Strom, would you like to?
Mr. Chair, very quickly, the ECFE program is funded through a mix of aid and levy. The current formula is $120 times the number of children in the district age 0 through 4. That shows up in the second column in the printout as the unadjusted ECFE population. We then have a provision in statute that says if the program serves or has in the district fewer than 150 children from the age of 0 to 4, they're given a minimum of 150. You can see then in the next set of columns the current law amounts of ECFE revenue, levy, and aid. Currently about $44 million at that $120 allowance, and it's split about evenly between the levy and the aid. The levy is at a fixed amount. The statute requires the overall levy to raise $22.135 million. The last 4 columns then show the impact of the bill as amended. If the formula were to be linked to the basic general education revenue formula, it would be about a $66 increase for most districts. It would be an increase of revenue of $24 million, and primarily, nearly entirely through state aid, but there'd be a little levy adjustment the first year. And then the last 2 columns show the amount as an increase per the population that it's calculated on, the number of 0 to 4-year-olds. And then for comparison purposes, the last column shows what that is as an increase per pupil unit to measure it against other things like a formula allowance increase or other things that are done on the K-12 pupil count.
Thank you very much. Members, we have 6 members who have questions. This is a finance committee. So if it's relating to the finance and to the formula here, but the policy has already been determined. So Representative Moran?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Representative Halverson, for bringing this bill forward. When we talk about investment in education and what that looks like, I think this is a model example of what a good investment can be so often we look at the children, we look at the school, and it's not so often we look at parents and engaging parents in the educational process so that parents can be the first teachers of their kids and have the tools to be able to do that. And ECFE is an example of being able to create those spaces for parents where you see parents and not their issues and their struggles, but you see their strengths. And you work towards those strengths to just create better outcomes for the kids and the whole family. So I just want to say for the members, when we think about how we invest wisely in a holistic approach, this is a good investment.
Thank you. Representative Seltzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make this very quick. I just have to say that there are two ECFE members from Hopkins here, and I just want to speak out strongly in support of this bill. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Were they going to raise their hand or something?
Yeah, would you raise your hand? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Christine Feist and Katie Williams. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for your work. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and this is in regards to the spreadsheet and numbers and finance. I'm noticing there are several real districts, not the phantom ones that show up on the sheet, that have a greater number of adjusted ECFE than they have total population of students. Therefore, it might be, good to look at having some sort of a slight change. To me, that seems like it's mathematically not proper.
Mr. Chair, if I'm understanding the question correctly, the minimum population of 150, the legislative purpose at the time that was put in place was that some minimum amount of funding was necessary. That translates currently to an $18,000 amount of funding, regardless of how small the district is. Whether that's still a valid question or not, I haven't heard debated in the last 25 years or so, but that's what causes that variability in the funding column there. Is if a small district, if you were to look on the spreadsheet, for example, at Hill City, they have 64 children in the district age 0 to 4, but they're guaranteed that minimum of 150.
Mr. Chair, I did notice some that where the 150 was almost 3 times the population, and I thought that didn't seem quite.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's a good question. I didn't realize that either. Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, Representative Halverson, is there a report that is done on ECFE so that we can tie our policy decisions to the results based on our financial obligation? And is that something that MDE provides us with, or do you do that individually? And maybe it's for the testifiers. Ms. Barrett, maybe you know? Ms. Barrett?
We do have some state reporting that we do each year. It's mostly on demographic information. I know MDE is putting into place right now statewide some data collection efforts
longitudinal data
that we are all working on as districts right now.
Okay, thank you. And a question
thank you,
for Mr. Strom.
I think that's an excellent point.
And Mr. Strom, Mr. Chair and Mr. Strom, is the $68 million then the 3.2% of the general fund?
Madam Chair, yes. The 3.2% of the 5,806 gives the total of the $68 million, which is a $24 million increase.
Representative Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple quick comments to the testifiers. Thanks for your testimony today and your desire to help the children. Just one way that you might look to supplement some additional funds for your district for this need, I think, is to look at the PTA Angel Fund, which, according to previous testimony at this committee here, it is tax deductible for individuals. I'm not sure businesses. I'm not sure if it's state and federal. I know it's state. But I think if you spread the word in your community and it's tax deductible, businesses, individuals might step up and give you some additional funds in order to meet the need. That'd probably also be true on the previous bill also. When I was on the school board, I won't tell you how many years, but I was on there, I was amazed by the generosity of local organizations and individuals in our community. When we had a particular need for the students, how they stepped up and met that need. was just remarkable to me. So I think that same spirit in the state of Minnesota is pretty much statewide, so I'd encourage you to try to tap into that. The other quick comment I'd make is that there is a study out of the University of California that showed that if parents were raised in a traditional two-parent family.
Representative Gruenhagen, do you have a finance question or a comment here? We're running short of time.
All right. I will leave it at that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Representative Bernardi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to verify the meaning of this increase per pupil unit that was spread across the full student population at the end. What that basically is telling me is that on the average, that for the number of school districts that have kids that are 4 years old, the average would end up being equivalent to $26 per unit.
Mr.
Right.
Chair, Representative Bernard, yes, the idea behind that was to say that an alternative to doing $26 on the formula allowance would be doing $26, doing this $24 million and distribute it as this. So it basically shows you the contrast between this and if money were on the general education formula allowance.
Representative Bernardi.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and that's very helpful. And I think it's important that doing it the way that's proposed in this bill shows the need for the amount of 4-year-olds within are we still in 4-year-olds? No, yeah, 0 to 4 within the school district. So, like, for example, Columbia Heights, their number is higher, which is telling me that they have a lot more than state average of students from 0 to 4 coming into their school district. Yes, thank you.
And Representative Breinert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is in regard to data that might be provided by ECFE to the legislature in terms of aligning with our decisions in terms of, the achievement gap and so forth, other investments we make. And I would just encourage ECFE to partner with some of our universities because I think the data is there. We have the base for moving forward, really a good research model. We know this is a gem. We have 40 years of experience. We know it's community building. It's rooted in families' involvement, and you can't beat what we have there. So I'd say you've got the data. Just get some partners.
Thank you very much. Ms. Beard, Ms. Euling, thank you so much. Is there anyone in the audience that would care to speak for or against House File 2264 as amended? Not Representative Halverson, any closing comments?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for your time, and I ask for your support.
Thanks for bringing this forward. So House File 2264 will be, as amended, will be laid over for possible inclusion into the finance bill. Thank you very much. Our next bill, House File 2734. Representative Morgan, would you like to move? Representative Morgan moves House File 2734 before the committee. Chair Lenczewski, I think, is this your first time before the Education Finance Committee?
It is. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I thought about going to the bakery and getting donuts.
Well, I saw you perk up a lot during that PTA angel investment talk that Representative Gruenhagen had. Also, Representative Chair Lenczewski, this next bill that we will be hearing, we're sending your way. The Representative Metsa's bill will be coming your way also. Yes, Representative Gruenhagen.
I think she would have liked my follow-up comment, too.
Very good. So, thank you so much for being here.
Mr. Chair and Representative Morgan, thank you for moving my bill. Mr. Chair, I just personally thank you so much for hearing this bill. It's wonderful to be before this committee, and we're going to catch you up right now. So, House File 2734, what we're doing here is pretty simple if you look at the language. We're adding the Works Museum in Bloomington to the list of appropriations that the Minnesota Department of Education does to other museums that assist children in their learning. This facility, I'm sure many of you know about, is very popular in the region. It's a very exciting place, and people just, every time they've been there, just can't wait to go back. And I will leave it at that and let my testifiers talk to you about their wonderful facility.
Very good. Who would like? Go ahead. Thank you.
Good morning,
Welcome.
Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Jill Mizelles, and I'm CEO of the Works Museum. And thank you for having us here today. I will be brief and just really want to introduce you to the Works and briefly tell you what we do. We're an institution that's been around for about 19 years, and we were one of the first institutions to prioritize the engineering, and STEM education. And what we really do is work with families, teachers, and students to inspire and engage kids to explore engineering and STEM in the elementary years. Our focus is particularly on that elementary K-6 age child because that is where children are forming their academic interests, and we really have the opportunity to engage and inspire and interest them in engineering. We know if we don't inspire and interest kids in science, technology, engineering, and math when they're young, that by the time they reach 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, their interest in those subject areas decreases dramatically. And that is important. That is really important to note. If we can't engage kids into the middle school and high school years, we will have fewer kids as they enter college and the workforce in engineering and other STEM professions. And we know research shows that by 2020, the STEM workforce need in Minnesota will increase by 18%, whereas for other industries it will increase only by 13%. So it's important that we keep those young minds engaged and developing the skills they need to be contributing to our future workforce. The way we engage kids is through our on-site school field trips, where they have an opportunity to explore the museum and then take one of our many classes focused on the curriculum that is required as part of the K-12 academic science standards. So our curriculum connects with those engineering requirements that are part of the K-12 science standards. And besides reaching students on-site, we have a very robust program that we take outside, not only to the Twin Cities, but to greater Minnesota, so we can reach all of Minnesota children through our experiences. The other core part of what we do is train teachers. Most elementary teachers, they have a general licensing and are not experts in the field of engineering. So science alone can be intimidating enough. But when you tack on engineering, they almost freeze because they don't realize what it is. So we partner with many school districts, with the Department of Education, with the University of Minnesota, University of St. Thomas, to really help educate teachers and make them feel comfortable introducing engineering concepts in their classroom. And we are known for our annual E4 conference every year, where we reach about 350 teachers, giving them really practical resources and activities to do with their children in the classroom. And I think one teacher says it best. We had a teacher recently at one of our classes and noticed she was at what would typically be a 3rd grade class, but was there with a group of 5th graders. And we asked, what are you doing here, with your 5th graders? And she said, they were learning this subject matter in 3rd grade, but we know this topic is going to be on the MCA test coming up, and we want to reinforce that learning and reinforce what those kids learned in 3rd grade so they can perform on those tests. So I think that's a testimonial to what we do. And I think I will, in keeping it brief, just really, hone in on that we are essential and we are unique in that engineering realm for elementary students. And we know what we do works. We have many children who started coming to the works when they were 8, 9, 10 years old, participating in camp after camp every year, who now are educators for us and who've gone on to college to explore and study math, engineering, science. And our most recent success story is a young gentleman by the name of Kevin, who graduated last year and is now a freshman at Cornell University studying aerospace engineering. And if you ask him, and more importantly his mom, because we know parents are key to what we do, how he got to where he is, and they say one of the great impacts in his lives was his experiences at the Works Museum. So Mr. Chair, committee, I thank you for your time today and really hope you'll consider our bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Masels. Thank you.
I'm Brenda Rainey, Director of Development at the Works Museum, and I think Jill said it all.
Very good. Thank you. Very good. Members, we do have a sheet Ms. Johnson put together that does show other libraries and how they have been funded.
Museums.
So, what did I say? Library, museums. Thank you. Representative Erickson, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, I don't know if you've visited these museums, but they are fantastic. But my question is to you, Mr. Strom. Does our history, give me a historical, or all of us, a historical background on when we started a relationship with the various museums that are listed on the handout, and then the addition of the works, which I hope we'll do, because these are amazing places to build interest in STEM and also to ignite in our children that interest in an area where I think we've been lagging, and that's in science, math, engineering, and technology. So what's our history on this?
I'm going to ask Ms. Johnson.
Ms. Johnson, thank you.
Mr. Chair, Representative Erickson, the data that I put together goes back to fiscal 10, and I can go back farther and provide that, but this is what I've put together so far, just including the direct appropriations from the general fund and the arts and cultural heritage. Arts and cultural heritage has kind of come online in the more recent years, but I can get the longer historical perspective for you.
Thank you. That would help. I think that we really concentrated on this when we adopted our STEM policies a few years ago, and I think that's when we had under a former Representative Alice Seegert, I know that there was a great emphasis on this. So good work done in Bloomington, and I just recently had a grandchild visit from California, and I tell you, the St. Paul Children's Museum was the highlight of his visit.
Thanks for sharing that. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And looking here, I notice you've got the Duluth in there and St. Paul. Rochester, is that not listed because there's not enough funds to show on the chart?
Ms. Johnson?
Mr. Chair, I didn't see that when I went back for these last 3 bienniums, I didn't see any appropriation directly related to it. These are direct appropriations from the state. There may be from the state art board. There may be grants that the Rochester one was approved for, but I didn't include that on this because that would have been prohibitive to try to look for all of the grants in all the different places. This is just for appropriations out of the state general fund.
Representative Breinert.
Mr. Chair, I think our testifier has information for Representative Quam on that.
Okay, very good. Ms. Vassell?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Quam, so prior to being at the Works Museum, I was actually at Minnesota Children's Museum, and I believe the money you're referring to for Rochester was part of legacy funding a couple years ago that went directly to the Children's Museum to be used to open that facility in Rochester.
Representative Breinert is shaking her head, yes. She had that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Quam, thank you.
I appreciate the clarification, and even though Rochester is the third largest city, we're used to not showing up on these charts.
Oh, my. Should we start taking a donation around pass the hat around here?
Mr. Chair, I don't have a hat. I'll go get one.
Final question here, Representative Hertaus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Lenczewski and testifiers, thanks for bringing this forward. I really support all the efforts that are being made in the area of STEM, and I certainly experienced in my high school training quite a stimulating experience with regard to efforts in science and math. But I think one of the reasons I'm a strong advocate for it is that our country and our economy depends on the development of science, technology, engineering, and math. And most importantly, to be successful at that, it really develops critical thinking skills on the part of our students. And lastly, those critical thinking skills are so necessary in all aspects of life, not just in STEM, and encourages, responsible decisions as they move into adults. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Ms. Masells, Ms. Rainey, thank you so much for testifying. And is there anyone in the audience who is here for or against House File 2734? Seeing none. Representative Chair Lenczewski, any last comments for the committee?
Thank you so much for the committee time, members, and for your kind comments. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, Representative Morgan moves to lay over House File 2734 for possible inclusion into the finance report. Thank you very much. Next, Representative Anzels. Do we have? Oh, there, Representative Metsa there. Representative Anzels, you want to make this motion, and this is going to be re-referred to taxes.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move 2629 be passed and re-referred to taxes.
Okay, and I don't think we say pass anymore. That's in the new decorum. It's just re-referral to taxes.
Re-referred to taxes.
All right, members, there are education finance components to this. There are many tax components, maybe some capital investments. So this needs to be vetted in some other committees also. So Representative Metsa, thank you so much for being here. You have an interesting project, so please proceed.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, and I was wondering if we could get the bill in the shape I needed in and move the A3 amendment.
Okay, Representative Anzels, did you want to move, is that the A3 amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the A3 amendment.
All right, members, the A3 amendment has been moved. Representative Metsa, is this just the, put it in the shape that you wanted at this point?
Correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and then we'll go over it. All right, any further discussion? If not, I'm going to call for the vote on the A3 amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion does prevail. The amendment is adopted. Representative Metsa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this is a bill that has taken a lot of time over the course of the last few months working with our local school districts. We've had a very interesting discussion and have decided, my districts have decided they'd like to head in the direction of a co-location and versus a consolidation right now. And so this bill kind of outlines how we would do that by forming a joint powers and some other tweaks, as you suggested. There's quite a few things that need to be vetted by the other committees. It's been a complex process getting in the shape it is in now, but we feel that it's in the best interest of our communities to move forward with this and lay out a skeleton structure so that these districts can move forward with their idea.
Very good. And you have some testifiers, Representative?
I do, Mr. Chair.
And if you would, whoever wants to go first, and please introduce yourself for the committee.
Sure. My name is Betsy Olavanti. I'm a Mount Iron Buell School Board member. I sit on the joint co-location committee that is populated by the 3 different boards. I am a 1993 graduate of Mount Iron Buell High Schools, and I'm also a PTA member and mother of 3 children matriculating through the Mount Iron Buell Public Schools right now.
And what is the nickname or the mascot for that?
The Rangers.
Oh. Jeez, surprise. Okay.
It was a stretch.
Yeah, that was.
Finally, we get to talk about Ranger.
Oh, jeez. I wish I had not asked. Please proceed. All right.
Sure. So I have 3 sons matriculating through the Mount Iron Buell Public Schools right now. And 20 years ago, the curriculum that I enjoyed, which prepared me very well for the electrical engineering degree I pursued in college, is no longer offered with the regularity that it was when I was there. Similarly, my husband matriculated through the Virginia Public School System, which is another partner in this project. And the vocational classes that he enjoyed while he was there is no longer offered with the same regularity as well either. So over the last 20 years, the populations in our area have declined dramatically, and our student populations have reflected that. Therefore, we have less student body to work with when setting up our classes and keeping our curriculum as varied as we need it to be. So some of the challenges that we face are industrial technology, vocational classes, the AP courses, career readiness, all those sorts of things. 2 of our 3 districts have limited vocal music and fine arts programs as well for students that are involved in those types of activities. And we also have limited technology support right on our campus. We purchase those services outside. Exploratory programs for career readiness have been reduced or eliminated because of limited enrollment, your FACS, those sorts of things. Family and Consumer Science is that acronym. And therefore, our students have limited means to recognize what their interests and where they lie and start pursuing those interests, right as they hit college and things like that. So some of the improvements then are directly related to the challenges that we have. Student travel time for our shared vocational campuses. Right now, all 3 of our schools share vocational and technology courses. So our students are bused from Mount Iron Buell over to Evelyn or from Mount Iron Buell to Virginia and vice versa. And they spend a lot of travel time. They leave early from the class before the vocational, and they come back late. And that is reduced instructional time in classes that they need in order to pursue that vocational class that is not offered on our campus. So bringing all three of these school districts together in a co-located campus would reduce that travel time and increase their time in the classroom. We would enhance our curriculum. I'm going to be on that curriculum committee, and we've been talking about things like robotics, career exploration and readiness, internships, and a lot of focus on science, technology, engineering, and math, our fine arts, and our fine arts performance. We could increase our foreign languages and offer more of those and more in-depth, so students who want to pursue that for longer than the 2 years that we can currently offer could do so. And it would allow us to focus special education opportunities on specific disabilities, allow more challenge courses, AP, concurrent enrollment, and would be a more efficient use of our teacher expertise and time. So, committee chairperson, I thank you so much for letting me testify today and your interest in our project.
Thank you very much, Ms. Olavanti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Tim Reardon. I'm with the Virginia School Board. I've been on the Virginia School Board for 12 years, and for most of the 12 years, our district has been talking to up to 5 different districts in our area about co-locating or consolidation. And this whole project actually started in 2009-10 when we did a pilot project with co-location to study a joint building with Mount Iron Buell. At the end of that, we did a 7-site study throughout the 3 districts of Evelyn, Gilbert, Mount Iron Buell, and Virginia, of which the Merritt site, which we're proposing, is one that is already owned by the district, which was a positive. People are probably wondering why the largest district of Virginia is going to be locating outside of our district. Virginia is landlocked by mining companies on 3 sides. And then we have Mount Iron to our west. So it was a logical place because we have not sufficient land to build a school within our boundaries. These mines blast between 3 and 6 times weekly during their peak seasons. And that goes right in hand with our building history. These blasts caused damage not only to our building, they've caused damage to Mount Iron Buell, but in our building in 2009, they buckled a wall and we had to, on our 2nd floor, we had to close down 9 classrooms and vacate it until the engineers found that our school was safe for our students to return. This past year, we've done a facility study, and just to update, our senior high alone will cost $35 million. And we find that it's very hard to put that much money into a building that is over 110 years old. We have had to close a pool because of it being so old and leaking and not being up to code. And in the next year, we will be spending over $300,000 for our existing pool to bring it up to date. Between our 3 districts, also, just a side note, our buses travel over 2,800 miles daily, and we crisscross each other. So this type of a co-location, we won't be running buses back and forth to each other's districts. We would be doing all of our transportation together. So I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reardon. Before we go to the next testifier, I'd like to ask Mr. Strom just to talk briefly for members, what are the education finance components in this bill?
Mr. Chair, members, there are several issues related specifically to education finance. There are also, I think in many views, the taconite area is a shared area between the K-12 and the education finance, but I know in the tax committee the particular taconite provisions will get a fair amount more hearing. In terms of let me sort of categorize these by major area very quickly for you. In terms of authorizations, the new special joint powers arrangement is established in subdivision 2. This essentially provides a way for districts to jointly operate a facility without having to go through a consolidation process and without using the regular joint powers authority, but a special joint powers authority that would give them more say about how some of the decisions are made. So in terms of an education policy, that's certainly one. In terms of the formula for consolidation transition aid, this on the preliminary fiscal note was listed as an area. The bill proposes to increase the current amount of consolidation transition aid that's available to all school districts in the state from its current level, which totals $300 over a 2-year period, to a $300 amount per year for 5 years. This would apply to all school districts that are consolidating, as well as those that enter into a special joint powers like the one proposed in this bill. There's a provision that exempts a group of districts that operate a joint facility from the duty to maintain an elementary and secondary school. This essentially means that the districts would not have to separately offer the 7 to 12 program if that's at the joint facility. Then there's some changes to the way that taconite and debt service interplay with each other. To simplify those, basically, this would require that the debt service payments be calculated first, and then the taconite amounts applied to those debt service amounts. And Mr. Chair, then finally, as a school finance matter, the distribution from the taconite funds, the several taconite funds that are tracked into this new trust account are specified in Section 13, and that's arguably a school finance issue in terms of how those distributions go and what effect they would have on school district finances. With that, Mr. Chair, and then finally, perhaps not this committee as well, but generally this committee looks at those proposals. This bill also proposes to use an unspecified amount of state bond proceeds, if available, through the Capital Investment Committee for the Cooperative Facilities Program, which the jurisdiction of which is in this program, or is in this committee, and that's in Section 18 of the bill, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Next testifier, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mark Forty. I'm a member of the Evelyn-Gilbert School Board. I started my school boarding career back in the 1980s and was on the school board when we consolidated with Gilbert. So I have some firsthand experience on how putting two schools together can enhance, maintain their curriculum offerings. Mr. Reardon talked about some damages to buildings. Our school, high school, is also 100 years old. And I think in your handout you see where we're looking at a potential $12 million investment. $8 million of that is to upgrade our heating system. And replace the heating system because it is on its last leg. There have been comments about vocational travel back and forth between our districts. If we were to have our own vocational facility, it would cost $4 million just to build that facility. But currently, with the arrangement that we have with the other districts, we spend $40,000 a year transporting students back and forth from our district to where they can get their vocational courses. You see in your handout the number of students that we're talking about in our 3 districts. Mountain Iron Buell has 214 7 through 12 students. Evelyn-Gilbert 481. Virginia 725 for a total of 1,420. Now, when this process started, it was Virginia and MIB school boards talking about co-locating. Evelyn-Gilbert was not involved at the outset. Myself, a couple other board members, our superintendent sat in on some of their committee meetings that they were holding. We went back to our board, talked about the plan that they were working on. The way they were going to go about this was very impressive. They had a good plan together. We did not want to be left out. We're approximately 4 miles from the other 2 districts. So we passed a motion to become part of the co-location. The other 2 school districts, Mountain Iron Buell and Virginia, went back, repassed the motion to include us. I'm glad that they did. Now, I mentioned the numbers of enrollment for 712. I like to look at it more as an increase in student body proportionally. Now, with Mountain Iron and Buell in Virginia doing it themselves, Mountain Iron's student body would have increased by about 4.5 times. Virginia's would have gone up by 30%, both significant increases in the student body, which is reflected in what they'd be able to do academically for their students. Now, with Evelyn Gilbert joining, that changes the dynamics quite a bit. Mount Iron is looking at an increase of somewhere around 7 times of their student body and what they'd be able to offer to the students. Our student body would increase threefold, 300% increase. Virginia, the largest district of the three, they would experience a doubling of the student body that they serve. I like to look at it better that way. I think it implies really what would be able to be done academically for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forty. Representative Metsa, do you have any other testifiers?
I guess we'll leave that, Mr. Chair, open for questions.
Very good. Very good. Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My only comment is this is a policy change as well as a finance issue, so I'm wondering why this was not referred to policy.
Representative Erickson could still, I suppose, do that. I know the big, it's got some big tax things in there that still need to be heard, and I suppose there is some policy. It could go through there, too. I think it might have several stops.
Mr. Strom did note policy in his remarks.
Yes. Yeah. So, Representative Erickson, that's a good point. I mean, it could go to capital investment also still, so it's got a few stops on the way. Representative Ansels?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quickly, members, Representative Metsa, I sincerely want to thank you for your diligence and your hard work. This is really hard, members. This is really hard. And this is long overdue. And this is precisely what I've been talking about over the years in our gatherings here as committee members. This has to be done. It is going to be incredibly hard, but you're doing good work, and all of us are going to try to help you continue to work through all of these issues, especially the issues involving governance and, of course, putting together the package that brings this about. But sincerely, I want to thank you for what you're doing here.
Representative Metsa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Ansels. And I think he hit on some key points. This is hard for any community to go through. And I know since I was, if I can stand to give you an example, about this big, my area has been talking about some form of consolidation or co-location. A few districts have moved that way. And I think that them coming together, bringing an idea, and for 3 school districts to be in agreement on something is quite a feat in itself. And one thing I did want to point out is in this bill, it does leave the communities and the members from each district, or I should say the voters from each district, the chance to make the final decision. And so with that, and with the Department of Education having to approve any policy and or curriculum that's going through, just like any other district would have to, with a few of the exceptions on the policy side, would be that the elementary schools would be considered, part of the district, even though they weren't part of the joint powers necessarily. And so those are some of the little changes we're making. This isn't about taking an elementary school out of the community. This is about having it as a whole for 3, 7 through 12 operations to move forward together.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to testify for or against House File 2629? Please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Peter Coyle. I represent formally U.S. Steel, but I'm here today on behalf of the Iron Mining Association. Mr. Pagel had a conflict and couldn't be here this morning, so I just want to comment briefly on the bill on his behalf.
Very good.
First of all, I want to acknowledge the efforts of the author. I come from a small school district myself, and so I understand the pressures of local school districts in funding excellence in their education system, and we understand that that's what the goal is here. I want to comment only briefly on the tax aspects of it. The author's intent, and I believe the district's intent, is to try to create a mechanism to tax the private landowners who are the beneficiaries of royalty payments under the leases that they may have with mining companies, including in some instances with U.S. Steel. But there are other mining companies as well that are affected. The concern we have is that the leases that we have really just kick that tax back up to the mining companies. So in effect, while the intent of the bill appears to be to target the landowner, the way the leases are structured, those taxes just get passed back off to the taconite companies, so it's a tax on the mining companies. And that's a concern for us. We already generate close to $200 million in tax and royalty payments to the state of Minnesota or to local communities, and that tax bill was increased somewhat last year. And so we're in a tough environment. The mining industry is always a difficult industry. These folks know better than do I. They live up there. We're just trying to do the right thing as best we can, but we also want to help the school districts be successful in any way that we can. Thanks very much for the opportunity to testify this morning.
Mr. Corral, thank you. Representative Anzels.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members, just to provide a little balance here, these school buildings were built 100 years ago in partnership between the people of the Iron Range, the miners, and the mining companies. And it just, to me, makes good sense that as our number one employer, good employer, that we should be able to honestly ask their participation to further enhance the education that these mining companies have always been so supportive of. I'm a product of those schools, and I got a first-class education, and we want the children of the future to continue. Now, as far as royalty taxes, they don't pay any taxes. And the royalties, the fee owners, are such great American families as Rockefeller, Pillsbury, Hill, the Great Northern Ore Properties, Bennett, Longyear. These are family trusts that should be able to contribute a few pennies to the education of the next generation of Iron Rangers. And lastly, we tax the mining companies on their production. Perhaps we should have taxed them on their extraction. But the point is they pay no property taxes. And over about the last 20 years, their taxes have gone up a measly 10, 12, 14%, while the price of a ton of taconite pellets has gone up by over 80% in the last 20 years. So just to provide a little balance for my good friend here who did a real nice job of representing the mining companies, but I thought a little balance was in order, Mr. Chair, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Anzels. I'm sure that discussion will continue in Tax Committee. And Representative,
forward to it.
Yes, Representative Metsa, any final comments before we renew Representative Anzels' motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to come here and work with you on this, and any other concerns you have, please bring to me. We've got a few more stops, it sounds like, so I'm willing to work with everyone to get this bill in the shape it needs to be to pass. So,
Representative Metsa, this is a bold endeavor. Thank you. I mean, for those districts to come together, I know it's not easy. I teach at Dilworth, Glendon, Felton School District. Over the years, it's not an easy accomplishment. Representative Anzels renews his motion to re-refer House File 2629 as amended to the Committee on Taxes. I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carried. Thank you, members. We are adjourned.